Welcome to the first episode of 2023, where I sit down with my good friend Jean-Luc and Jenna. Jean-Luc and Jenna and I and Nick Hinton are in a giant research group together. Well, it can't be giant if there's only four of us, but still, we have a good time. We do a lot of really in-depth research behind the scenes that doesn't really make it out into the public, but here is a nice little sneak peek. We got Jenna out for the first time on camera to come out and discuss some of these things that all have to do with UFOs. It's dark, it's scary, it's wild. And there's connections that you wouldn't necessarily assume are connected. They're both like just encyclopedias of knowledge, man. You know what you're talking about. I feel like half the time when I'm talking to you guys, I'm like, well, I'm not contributing shit to this conversation. I'm just going, wow, that's so rad. Like, that's really good. And I'm like,
well, you do contribute. You do contribute to it. It's just that in a different way. You're like a circus master.
So, a ringleader.
You round it up. It's like, I want to hear this, I want to hear that, explain this, explain that. But that's good because then it focuses me anyway to actually talk about the stuff that might be interesting to somebody. Because I've just been talking to my dad about all of the crazy stuff, and my aunt actually, right, who's the one who did our family tree.
Oh yeah,
she did all the McLeod stuff that I've been banging on about.
Right.
Which obviously links back into this sea serpent stuff and the Merovingians. So anyway, I start talking to them about all this over dinner. And I think my dad just wants to have me put into a mental asylum. Honestly, yeah. He goes, you do understand, don't you? Yeah, these are just myths. I'm going, well, yeah, but maybe they're not just myths, Dad. He's just like, well, come on. They're clearly just myths. Right? King Arthur's Round Table, Melusine, Merlin. Are you crazy? I'm like, no, I don't know if I am. French
it doesn't even matter to me, like whether it is or not, because I feel like there's people in power that actually believe in it, and to me that's what matters, because it affects the whole world if these people believe it,
Absolutely.
Great point, because even if it doesn't and they believe it, then they're spinning us as society in the direction of their beliefs, no matter what they are. Right. I mean, that's what they're doing.
Well be real. I don't know if it's
even if a tenth of it's real, it's still enough to like do more research and think about it. And even if it's not, then I think it's still important to look at, well, why were these myths created, and what purpose did they serve at the time? Because you got to realize that these were rational, intelligent people for the time period that were capable of obviously writing, there were schools of the time, there was definitely, books or whatever written, even carvings in stone, and all this was important enough to document. And you think about it, like every scrap of paper was worth, whatever, right? Nobody's just writing things down just to make shit up. So, I mean, and even if it was just for fantasy or whatever, what kind of other allegorical or, other meanings that are baked into these things that, maybe are still hidden. Maybe they're doing it in a way at the time because of the truth of it was too hard to put out there. Like even now, I mean, there's things that people hide in fiction that are true, right? That are too hard to grasp.
Well, this is what I said to my dad, because he's like, well, you understand that what you're talking about is just myths and legend. And I said, yeah, I do, but also I'm not going to say that I know everything that's happened over the last 6 billion years that this planet's been here, or however long it's been. And evolution, if we're talking in terms of evolution, we know that we're supposed to have come out of the sea and then turned into monkeys and then turned into humans. Mm-hmm. So what's to say that something else didn't evolve the same way but stay in the sea, or go down and in and evolve in a much higher rate than us, or a similar rate, but so these ideas of serpent people are no different from simian people that like we're supposed to be, like from apes. So it's kind of like, and I say these things to him, and he kind of goes, yeah, I understand that, yeah, but he doesn't want to think about that,
But isn't your dad a professor or a scientist? I forget, one of the two. He's
my dad's he's a teacher. He was a teacher, but
right.
It was on my mum's side, all the professors. Like, so my granddad was Her Majesty's Inspector for the Arts. So, and then his kids all did the Cambridge thing, and my uncle was a professor in 20th century history, espionage, MI5, MI6 and stuff.
Nice.
So that's kind of like, that's been interesting to me to dig into his mind a little bit when I see him and ask him questions. I've told him a
How
little
does
bit.
he relate your questions as opposed to your dad? I mean, when you ask him, when you talk to him about some of this stuff, is there a different response, obviously, from him?
Yeah, there is, because he doesn't believe in some of the stuff I believe in, or I think about anyway. But what he does know is that, because my granddad was clearly interested in all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So when I talk to him about this stuff, it's nothing new to him. He's kind of like, well, you're talking about stuff that your granddad talked about. And so I do understand where you're coming from. And whereas he's not, when he talks about the secret services and stuff like that, you get into Freemasonry and secret societies, but because a lot of the secret keeping is done through those sorts of scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as I know, he's not any of that stuff, you know. Like, he never got interested in that. He just liked the history of it.
Right.
Yeah. So he ended up he was a professor at Cambridge doing that stuff in the 80s, 70s, 80s, and into the 90s a bit. But then my other uncle, he's history of photography. So he does he's written a few books about Victorian photography and the birth of photography and that sort of stuff, you know. So yeah, so it's all a bit academic. But then there's me, and I'm a delivery man.
Oh man, no, there's not. You know, that's bullshit. You know, we're all. I'm nobody. So what are you talking about?
Yeah, no, I'm not worried about any of that. It's just that I'm not worried about state. You know, I'm not worried about the status thing at all. Like, I've never really been interested in that stuff. I like learning stuff I want to learn about.
Yeah, it seems to be interesting how you and, I mean, Jenna especially, will find like this one sliver of something in your research, and it'll spur each of you on. So, like, you know, you'll come up with something like the whole like the DuPont stuff, the DuPont stuff, where I don't even remember how we got onto it, or who was the first that jumped into it or got into the DuPont thing, and it was just like a snowballed. And the research you guys have done in the past like 3 weeks have just blown my mind. Like,
in my mind, DuPont, and Jenna, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think it was when we found that link to the Jacques Vallée Spanish UFO crash, and it was.
I think maybe you found that. For me, it was when John Warner was talking about them in his book, which was chapter 108 or whatever, which was like a whole nother set of synchronicities that happened between me and you. I don't know if you remember that. That was like one of the big things that like got us connected, I think.
Yeah.
That was so weird. Yeah, so in that chapter 108 of John Warner's book, he's talking about the DuPont family and how they're part of whatever, the Committee of 300 or whatever. Yeah. So I started digging into the DuPonts then, and they're so weird. They're just weirdos.
Yeah, they are weirdos.
Like, and they're like in everything. So we just keep finding. I don't know when you found the thing with Jacques Vallée. I don't know when, if that was before or after, but then it's just kind of been popping up all over the place.
Yeah. Well, I mean that was purely just because of the idea of seeding narratives, because I know that when we talk, not on Zoom and stuff, but we've always talked about the idea of seeding a narrative, and that these stories have been placed and created and evidence put into certain parts of the public sphere.
Right.
And that if you follow the puzzle, you can be led to certain answers. And one of them was, for me, was that in the Jacques Vallée investigated a case that was from the early 60s, I think, which had materials that had been left in some Spanish town, UFO, apparently materials from a UFO. And one of the materials was like a canister that when they cut it open, there was like some film in it with sort of hieroglyphic writing on, also with coded writing. But the film was made of a substance called Tedlar. I think that's how you pronounce it. And Tedlar at the time had only been used by NASA in some of the stuff they were working on, and had been developed by DuPont. So all of a sudden you've got a material that's being created by, only at that time being created by the DuPont industries, was being utilized by NASA, and suddenly turns up in a UFO sighting where people reckon they've seen a saucer and they've actually got materials from the, and blah, 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 blah. Which then leads on to all the research. That's kind of what set me going off it, really.
And then I was going through my notes and stuff, and I was looking back at the Fred Krisman stuff and how he connects to all this stuff. Like, the JFK assassination and the Maury Island thing, especially.
Yeah.
And we were looking at if there's a possible connection with Maury Island and DuPont, and it looks like there is, and then there was some discussion about, I think it was actually in Project Blue Book, it might have been, where they were talking about how it might have actually been like illegal dumping of some kind of debris, and it was like some kind of hoax. But okay, so here's where it gets interesting though. So Michael Riconosciuto, who's the guy who was involved with the Promise software scandal, which is where like he was on this Cabazon Indian reservation working with Wackenhut, which is a security company who works for Area 51. And Bobby Ray Inman was on the board of that Wackenhut. Okay, so Riconosciuto was working there doing that Promise software, backdoor thing. His dad worked for Fred Krisman. And then Michael Riconosciuto also worked for Hercules, which is also part of DuPont, which is also where Jack Parsons worked for a while. Like, it's just so weird how these things are all like, they seem to somehow be connected. I don't know how, but they all kind of overlap. It's weird. I don't know.
Well, there's serious syncs that go on with this stuff, as we found out, and you can't really get away from it, can you? Like, and part of me over the last few years when we've worked on things like this, like the syncs coming thick and fast, like to start with, it frightened me. Like, quite honestly, like I'd lie in bed and just be like, the absolute fuck is going on? Like, why is this happening? Like, seriously, it's like, this is wild. Like, but you kind of, after a while, you just have to live with that and think, right, this actually is real, and these syncs are happening, and it's wild, isn't it? Like, I mean, that's part of it. You get solid data, you get good research, but then you also get these crazy synchronicities, and I think that's part of the journey, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't even know what to do with it all sometimes. It's just like, it could be nothing. It could just be coincidences, but there's so many of them. It's hard to believe that they're just coincidences.
Well, there's not like, you can't tie all of that together. You're not like putting red string on the board, like and just. But I mean,
my wife made me take mine down. Like, it got a little too big.
For Christmas, you had to take it down. The family's coming over, but like, so a lot of it is like, so when we just talk about seeding narratives, so either they're seeding the narrative and they're tying all this shit together into some bizarre, weird, really tiny way that only people will pick up on, right? As it looks like breadcrumbs, or it's all just really all related and not everybody picks up on it. I mean, the whole Hercules thing, the Hercules split off from DuPont because it was like a federal, like DuPont was too big.
It was like it was like a monopoly, whatever, whatever you call it.
Yeah, so they had like too much. So they just it's just a DuPont company, but it's Hercules, and then they had contracts with the government to do all kinds of shit, same as DuPont. But they still, all of these things are all like subcontractors or front companies or whatever for the military industrial complex. All of them are, and they all have ties to each other. So a lot of the stuff, like Bobby Ray Inman, right? So when you're in the government, and these guys leave government, like the first thing they do is all these big companies come going, yeah, we'll pay you whatever. You're going to sit on our board and you're going to be our into the government so we can get more contracts and we can get our foot in the door. And like, if you look at the panels of the majority of the contractors that have any type of contract with the government, they're all ex-military, all high-ranking officials that are at the tops of the board, CEOs or whatever, and they're all in there and they all got their fingers going into the pie. So they do their whatever many years in the government, they leave, and basically they're just right back in there, but with a different hat on. A lot of these are also, from what I've looked at, are family related, right? So like the dad would work at DuPont, and then the son or the grandson, or like there's all these things because they had this relationship where like, well, yeah, you're going to go to college and you're going to be a chemist just like your dad, and you're going to work at DuPont just like your dad, and all these things, right?
Apparently DuPont, like, well, certainly during the 90s, they were accused of trying to spread kind of amongst their training and their teammates and everything, a new age message. So like, have you read anything about this?
No.
That they were kind of like pushing this message. It was like, when you joined up, a lot of training and a lot of the kind of like, resources that were given to you as you went through your progression, they were accused of it being like kind of anti-Christian, of it being new age spirituality almost being pushed. Yeah, I'll try and find some documents and stuff and some screenshots that you can show. So I'm not just blabbing on, but yeah. So it's kind of like people had commented on that there was this idea that within DuPont that they were pushing some kind of ideology. But then, like we know that DuPont there was a DuPont member at the channel of the Nine, Andrija Puharich. The idea that at the Nine you got Andrija Puharich, who Jenna, you found out the stuff about the dental implant work.
Yeah, he patented a piezoelectric like dental implant.
That's it, yeah. So the dental implant, the piezoelectric, some of the stuff for dental piezoelectric, we found some of that era had been developed by the DuPonts.
Yeah, wasn't it zirconate or something like that?
Yeah.
It was a certain, it was a chemical, right? Or like
which is in his patent, and I think he found something about DuPont manufacturing
zirconium or zirconite.
Yeah,
zirconium, yeah.
So it all starts to come together, and then what was the thing where we were talking as well about Roswell? Like some of the newer information from Roswell was that you'd had the hieroglyphic, the metal sort of bar that had the hieroglyphics on that spelt out Eleuther. Or is that, I don't know how you pronounce it, Eleuther, which was the Greek name for freedom, which was also the first name of the start of the US dynasty, Eleuthер DuPont. And so the first part of their business when they set up in the US was called Eleutherian Mills, where they produced, I think, gunpowder, wasn't it?
Smokeless powder. Was that the big smokeless powder thing that they did?
That might have been later. I don't remember.
Oh, okay.
Maybe later, yeah. I can't remember, but the first sort of plant they had back in a long time, hundreds of years ago, was Eleutherian Mills, named after Eleuther DuPont. So when you see the DuPont company, it's called EI DuPont, and the E stands for Eleuther. So it gets you back into the idea that some of the materials that have been tested on that metal were also materials developed by DuPont. So when you start looking at it, you go, yeah, looks like DuPont have been making a spicy casserole out of all this for quite some time now. Just throwing in some ingredients.
So like what comes first here on this though? Do you think DuPont's had successfully reverse engineered part of a crash and used the material for other things? Or do you think that DuPont actually created this and they're part of that whole breakaway advanced tech civilization because of their status, because they're one of the 20 to 300 families? Are they doing all this shit in secret and have this advanced tech and they're part of that offshoot civilization, or are they it could be both? I'm just trying to figure out.
Or part 3, choice C, they're sowing a narrative to create a new world order. And that, I don't say that lightly, like the new world order, but in terms of you sow seeds of a legend over is it called determinism, where instead of looking at your immediate future that's going to happen to you in the next year or something, it's like looking at the next 100, the next 200. Right. And families like that, I guess they think like that. They look at empire and they look at kind of world crafting. So if it takes 100 years, 200 years, 300 years for this mythology to become grounded in some form of reality and belief system, that's how you birth a whole new era of human existence, by creating legend. And that's what we base a lot of our society around. So that's kind of what I believe. Although there is the element where maybe they were developing this stuff, and maybe they are part of a breakaway society, but I don't know, man, because they all seem to live in mansions on the surface of this planet with the rest of us and go crazy like John DuPont. And
yeah, let's talk about that. I mean, John DuPont was completely crazy, right? I mean, at the end there, some of the stuff you guys found, what was the thing that he was talking about, that he was like had a gun on him at all times, and he
had like a full psychotic break, and he thought something that he was being contacted by aliens. I don't know. There's a whole bunch of stuff. I
think he thought the aliens were controlling him, spying on him. that he had alien insects living inside his body.
Oh yeah, that's what it was. Yeah.
Although I know that psychosis, like especially cocaine psychosis, can make you feel like you've got bugs under your skin. And I know that from what I've read, John DuPont wasn't adverse to a few rails of coke, like so. So you never know.
Is he still in prison, or is he dead? Or I mean, I don't know where he's at now.
He's dead.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, I mean, but he was in. You got to think with the amount of money and the amount of resources that those families have. A lot of the times when those things happen, they kind of disappear, right? And things don't. But he was actually tried and convicted of murder, obviously. And there's movie and all that and everything about it. So like, there's one of those things where you try to disassociate. Well, that was just the crazy uncle or whatever. But if you start digging into it, like we have, I mean, it just goes down. You go down the rabbit hole to a spot where I don't think anybody really has. And as far as I know, I've not heard of anybody else creating that connection between ufology and see, look, somebody knows about what's going on. Ufology and the DuPonts at all. Like,
well, I mean, that's pretty good for us then, isn't it?
It's good for you guys. I didn't do anything.
Well, I mean, the link's kind of, where's it come up? It's come up in terms of like, we know that the DuPont stuff came out of that Jacques Vallée, the crash that he reported on, because I think he named him in the book.
Mm-hmm.
Or was it just the material he named? He named the material Tedlar. The material. He knew it was Tedlar, but maybe he didn't name it as DuPont.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing about DuPont in terms of ideology, I was reading the other day that back in the 30s, they funded an American terrorist organization, a right-wing, I guess pre-Nazi, called the Black Legion.
Never heard of this.
These guys. So the Black Legion were apparently vigilantes in Detroit and that region.
Mm-hmm.
And what they do is they go out and kill or threaten or intimidate people that weren't being good citizens, they believe. But it turned into almost like a racist hate group. Yeah.
Whoa.
So there was links even back then to a right-wing ideology coming from the DuPonts. Funded. I'm not gonna get sued here, but this is just things I've read.
Yeah.
The Black. If you look online, there's quite a lot about it. The Black Legion, I think they're called.
Wow.
I'll see if I can find, I'll see if I can find a picture and share my screen.
Yeah, they were involved with like German rearmament, during World War II. So they were definitely, Nazi sympathizers, to say the least.
Yeah. Oh, and there must have been quite a lot of those at the time as well, like especially in the industrial complex, like finding out where the money's going to go.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And plus we brought them all over here. So obviously, there was a lot of people who were sympathetic.
Well, yeah, that's the thing that, I mean, that's spoken about some, but I mean, like their ideology didn't just vanish as soon as they crossed the border. Right. I mean, and the things that got me to thinking about that early on, I think it was Jim Mars and was talking about was how during paperclip, especially during NASA, where the Russian and the US Nazi scientists, German scientists, former Nazi scientists were allowed to have unimpeded conversation back and forth the entire time. So like we were at the Cold War with Russia, and but the Germans were allowed to talk to each other the entire time without any type of oversight or anything. They weren't like, sequestered or anything, which was, it's like, well, okay, great. So they're doing all that. So then what else are they doing? Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you guys see that, by the way, on my screen?
Oh yeah.
So that's the Black Legion.
Political movement. Wow.
So if I go over to here and let's say Black Legion DuPont. Yeah, so yeah, you go. Look, so if I just have a quick look for it, finding page, Black Legion. So yeah, so down there, look, DuPont's General Motors company funded a vigilante terrorist organization to stop the unionization in its Midwestern factories called the Black Legion. Its members wore black robes decorated with a white skull and crossbones. So yeah, they've got some serious links back to the Klan, I guess, to a racist ideology historically, allegedly too, in case any solicitors are listening. But yeah, So hang on, I'm going to stop showing that. But yeah, so like I found that interesting because I was obviously like looking at what the ideology of this could be. If there's an idea of like bringing in some kind of new social order, it's like, well, what's it going to be? And it does seem like through running through all of this, there's a right wing element, you know.
Yeah, we talked about that the last time. There's always these things that keep showing up. I mean, Blake and I were chatting yesterday or today, I remember, and he was saying like he was been on this Nazi thing forever too. You know, he's like, there's always this Nazi or this right wing undertone to all of this UFO shit. Like, and it's veiled, right? But it's always there where, you know, it's you know, when you do see humans, they're all in the craft or whatever. They're all like either dressed in Nazi uniforms or they're white, you know, white. They're not, you know, people of color at all. You know, Patricia Vaughn, we still talk all the time. And it's just like, you know, there's no people of color at all in any of this stuff, even in the research and some of the other things. You know, the only thing you find in that is that whole Betty and Barney Hill thing, right? That's the only thing that's like at least made the mainstream, right?
And the Brazilian guy.
Oh yeah.
Whatever what's his name? He was like Boaz, the guy who, you know.
Oh yeah.
Like it was aliens to me, but whatever. What do I know?
They made a movie about him, didn't they? Like a document. Yeah.
I think so. I ended up watching the Missing 411, the new one.
Oh yeah, I fell asleep. I didn't do it.
And one of the, I don't want to give too much away if you guys aren't watching.
That's all right. That's
Spoilers.
Okay. You can spoil it.
So it focuses on like one specific park in one specific area in the US. And the thing that's interesting is that it's basically like three people that disappear, and he's, you know, obviously trying to spin it to be like a UFO thing. One guy gets abducted and comes back, you know, and he has a story which is really interesting. And the interesting thing is that they all have German last names.
Really?
So they also have like German heritage. And the guy gets returned, and he thinks that he gets returned because he had a vasectomy. So they couldn't use him for, you know, reproductive purposes or whatever.
Wow.
And then a couple other people disappear and they don't find them. So, but they all are, you know, have German heritage, which is interesting.
Yeah, well, yeah. Trying to like find that like master race stuff.
Yeah.
Weird, isn't it? Well, it's like, you know, like that thing I found the other day, again in Jacques Vallée, talking about Bob Lazar, you know, sending his contact to Jacques Vallée, and then the contact gets in touch, who happens to be a US colonel living in Las Vegas, writing on neo-Nazi headed paper with SS emblems on it and stuff. So even as far as the early 90s, we've got this neo-Nazi element coming into the mainstream of ufology. I mean, what is the most mainstream part of ufology? Probably up until TTSA and stuff, it was Bob Lazar, Area 51, Dreamland. So when it starts getting linked back to, again, to militia stuff, far right, neo-Nazism, ideologies, social structure change, I don't know, can't get away from it.
Well, that ties into the whole Timothy McVeigh stuff, and you know, the Oklahoma City bombing and all of those allegations too, right? That are I can't remember who popped out the letter from McVeigh. Wasn't there a letter that you wrote from prison or something that talked about UFOs? Or I knew he
talks about UFOs a lot. The book by Wendy Painting, which I will hold up because it's a very good book.
Oh, there it is. Look at that. Boom.
Good. I'm not done with it yet, but she talks a lot about how the UFO kind of culture influenced him, and it plays a big role. It's like bigger than you think. Yeah, it's hard, and it's, you know, this gets into the whole Steve Colbern thing. I don't know if you want to talk.
I don't know who that is. No comment.
Well, I don't know if you want to talk about that or not.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, it's nothing hasn't been written in a million other sources, so I don't mind talking about.
You can't cite publicly available information in the.
Yeah, I mean, it's in her book, so I mean.
Yeah.
The gist of it is that McVeigh was introduced to Colbern by this guy named Roger Moore, who allegedly had connections to like the Iran-Contra scandal. This is all in Wendy Painting's book.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's involved somehow in the bombing, they think, and he kind of gets off. Like he's sharing a mailbox with McVeigh. He's got all these really close connections, but somehow he kind of like wiggles his way out of being implicated in the bombing.
Mm-hmm.
Which is weird. Like they barely even investigate him, and then he like kind of shows back up, years later as this like alien implant expert. So
with Roger Lear,
yeah, and Jeremy Corbell's movie Patient 17, right?
Patient 17.
Yeah.
He is Patient 17, right? Isn't that the whole the what's the whole wrap of the story that
he's like the materials expert. He's like the one, examining the implants or whatever.
I thought for sure though that he had an implant too, and I thought it was like that was like
I think he did. Yeah, there's like some. I don't know if he was actually Patient 17. I think
he was Patient 15. I think. I think it was like it was kind of like in surprise. Guess what? I'm not just a materials analysis. I'm Patient 15. I've got an implant.
Well, there was like news articles where there's news articles where he's talking about how he was implanted. Remember? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So.
Well, he said a lot. But then we found out as well that his dad was a dentist.
Yeah.
Well, and his granddad worked for DuPont.
This is what's so interesting, because McVeigh, talked about having an implant, but he said it was put in by the army, like it was the military that did it to him. And he went, in Wendy's Painting's book, she goes into all the details about how many times he went to the doctor and the dentist, like a ridiculous amount of times, like ridiculous.
17 times or seven? Is it
75?
75 times you go to the dentist.
Like an absurd amount. And they didn't do an autopsy on his body after he was executed, which is, highly strange. Like I think the law was actually changed right before he was executed or something.
Wow.
But so that's weird to me. So, he's saying that the military had an implant in him. Then you've got Colburn, who, wiggles his way out of the whole, involvement in the bombing somehow, even though he's obviously like very closely tied to McVeigh.
Mm-hmm.
And then he shows up, later in the UFO crowd, pushing the idea of alien implants.
Right. And his dad was an army dentist.
Right. And then didn't his like grandfather work for DuPont?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's just like it might mean nothing, but it just seems it's got a slightly fishy smell in it. It's like ooh. Yeah. But anyway, this is all in public, it's all public knowledge, it's all there to be researched. So
what's the name of that book, Jenna? It's Wendy.
It's called Wendy. Apparition in the Heartland of the Real: The Secret Lives of Timothy McVeigh by Wendy Painting.
Oh man.
What's interesting though, right, is the fact that he was readily accepted, despite the fact that anyone with a keyboard can search these people up with these big claims and then find that certain elements of them belong to right-wing militias, neo-Nazi factions, were meth chefs, for fuck's sake. Selling their meth to Timothy McVeigh, who said that he spent his time setting off explosives with Colburn out in the desert whilst tweaking on meth. It's pretty suspicious, But but then at the same time, so you can find all that really easily, that he was arrested by the FBI, pulled a gun on them, a loaded gun on them, that he pretty much looked like John Doe #2 in the whole Oklahoma City bombings case. Got off, resurfaces with Roger Lear, gets
20 years later, right?
On a Jeremy Corbell documentary, and then reappears again in more recent tales, which, can link him to some of the really big names in modern ufology. So, this all could be very tenuous links, but they're all links that can be easily researched. I don't know why, it seems like a lot of people really, really care at the moment about the right wing too, and the element on Twitter about racism and bigotry and prejudice, but they don't seem to focus on any of this.
Yeah, imagine that.
It's the culture war taking over from like what actually is real research. It's like, come on, dig in, like actually research this shit, please. Because I don't want to be the only one who gets sued.
Gee, yeah, you know, if it's not in a 30-second TikTok, nobody's doing any type of research. And even
No,
if
I
it
know,
was
right?
completely fake, they're just going to fucking believe it anyway. So it doesn't matter. I mean, as long as it, it captures you emotionally or whatever. I mean, that's where people are just into it. And you see
I
all
think,
these things,
yeah, I think you have to look at so many things to find connections, and it's hard because you don't know where to start. But I feel like the UFO crowd gets a little like tunnel vision, and they don't really look outside. What else is going on with these other conspiracies that are actually happening and are
Yeah.
well documented.
Right.
So I don't know.
Well,
There's a lot of connections.
well, something that people have sort of asked me and stuff, and I've obviously asked over the last however many long with this is, what is the link then to these militias and the far right ideology to UFOs? And outside of mythology, outside of the idea of Nordic whites and the Nazis contacting aliens psychically from Aldebaran and all that stuff, what it comes down to is the idea that psychologically, people who are inclined to follow a militia mindset are paranoid of their government. They think the government is against them, is a potential enemy to prepare against, and keep secrets, which ties perfectly into the whole flying saucer mythos, the idea that the government are keeping secrets, they're controlling us using technologies we don't understand, that maybe those technologies are aliens. If you really want to take it as far as that, like that the overlords are extraterrestrial. Maybe if you dig between the lines, maybe the overlords aren't extraterrestrial in their minds. There could be a racial group. So you start getting into the old Illuminati stuff, which feeds back down to, all that shit, like the idea that there's a Jewish conspiracy. So you know what I mean? Like you can see how this stuff and how people with that mindset and the right wing are manipulated in such a way. And so that's the answer. And people have asked me, I've never somebody asked the other day online, I didn't even really want to get into it. Right. But that's what I think it is.
Well, even if you go back to like the early 50s alleged UFO contactees, like the Georges, like George Adamski and George Hunt Williamson, like George Hunt Williamson was like involved with the whatever that Nazi group was called. Was it the Silver Shirts or the Brown Shirts, whatever?
Oh yeah. Brown shirts, yeah.
I mean, and and it was always a blonde hair, blue-eyed Venusian or whatever it was,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that Jack Valet, because I was reading that Revelations just yesterday again and going through all this stuff, he made a quote and he just said what he noticed. I can't remember what the exact quote was, but it's strange how so many of these seemingly good-hearted, kind, new age types are easily influenced by fascistic influences. And that's not the exact quote, but that's basically what the vibe was. And that's what you find. And you find people get angry about it when you link these things together, because they'd be like, I'm not fascist, I'm peace and love. It's all about these light beings and everything's going to be great and all this. But really, when you dig behind all that, like you said, all the way back to the 50s and the Venusians coming down with these messages of love, there was always these links to the Nazis and the far right, like you can't get away from it. And I think anyone who actually does the research and the reading like we've been doing, you can't deny it. It's undeniable. And it kind of like but it's the message that no one really wants to hear about because it's unpalatable. I mean, I know that personally 3 years ago, like when I was starting this sort of pathway and trying to find out about this stuff and some of the things I'd seen as well, I was more about the wonder of it all. I looked at it probably through the lens of Steven Spielberg in 1979. Everything's beautiful, lens flare. It's so exciting, the idea that these aliens are coming, and but then I start reading and then just go, well, shit, so that is it. That's the truth behind it. But I think a lot of people get stuck in what they want it to be, and not what it probably actually is.
Yeah, I mean, I have no idea what it is, and I go back and forth. I think that there is some kind of like metaphysical element to it. I don't know. I don't think it's aliens per se, the way we're being told it is. But I also think there's this very sinister human element to it, that isn't being looked at enough.
Yeah, attached to itself. I mean, one of the things that got me was, I don't know where I found this at, and it probably was online, obviously, but I know I didn't come up with it myself. But what if, and this one really struck me because I was like, well, this is So we always put it in the context of, well, the government's keeping this shit from us. They're hiding it. They're lying to us. They don't want us to know anything about it. Anybody that says anything is silenced, right? The Men in Black and all this thing happens. People disappear. They get, what was the Forrestal gets pushed out of a window, supposedly, right? All these things. But if you take a step back and you go, well, maybe it's not, we think why doesn't Russia just come out and tell everybody if they have a program, or what? It's like, well, maybe though they're not in charge. Like maybe the governments or whoever we assume to be the powers that be aren't the powers that be. That there's a different higher level has technology, whatever else, could just be like, you want to talk about it?
Yeah.
You just disintegrate, and it's not the government doing it or whatever. It's the others, right? That could just take you out. So everybody's like, well, don't say shit because everybody wants to live, right? I don't know.
Well, I mean, Forrestal, from what I can work out, he was killed a year after releasing some information on the idea that they were going to put platforms up in our atmosphere.
Yeah.
So we put platforms in the atmosphere. Those platforms could then be used as, I think, some kind of solar gun, like the potential of a weapon.
Mm-hmm.
It could also be used as a stepping stone to another platform to keep going through the solar system.
Mm-hmm.
So when he released that information, I think in like 1948, I can't remember what year, was it 49 he died?
Yeah.
So he released information on that, which hit a few publications in quite a lot of depth. But then nothing else was released about that after those few. He spoke, some information got out, it got published in a few newspapers. He got killed, he got sectioned, and then he was killed or died or committed suicide or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But he was, at the time when he was killed, he was reading a poem about Ajax, the Greek legend Ajax, which was about reaching beyond your personal abilities. Yeah. So when you start looking into it, like, it looks again like there's been some kind of cover up, like everyone knows, but I don't think the cover up is probably aliens. I think it's the fact that we probably have got, or they were planning on putting structures into our atmosphere as weapons.
Mm-hmm.
It's all there. Like, I mean, the secret, it actually isn't a secret. It's just been made into one, if you know what I mean.
And it's made into a myth as well. It's a mythos, right? So now it's just wrapped into this whole thing of, well, about the aliens or, whatever, right? I mean, and that would be a good cover to hide a weapons platform, to be like, he's just talking about aliens, like, is that his mind, right? When it's actually a legitimate technological weapons platform that we don't want anybody to know about. Makes sense. Make them think they're crazy, right? Same thing with Benowitz, right? He's just...
Well, he gave a lot of details on it, like the idea that how they would get them up there, how we'd then build more to send out further into the solar system, how you'd make this gun, this laser weapon from the solar rays up there. Like, it was pretty heavily detailed, but only made it into a few publications before they pulled it. And then he was put into a sanatorium or whatever, and then he died. Mm-hmm. So, it's sort of one of them things that, again, it's like, so the reality of it is, you start getting some weird places here where secret space programs, not the secret space programs like people up there as super soldiers, but let's face it, if they put people up into our atmosphere in the 50s on manned platforms.
That's true. Warner told us about that, and that's documented. We've been able to dig that out, right? That they had manned satellites in the 50s and 60s. Yeah. Where there was like two or three men, I can't remember what it is, in a little tiny tin can that were spinning around the globe, taking photos, high-res photos of, spying, right? And then they would just replace
72 years ago, let's say, or maybe even more. So 72 years ago, they were doing that. And they were also planning these platforms with death rays. So you sort of think, all right, well, maybe the conspiracy here, you can cover up a lot of shit by saying that there's UFOs, when really it's probably just us sending people up and down to these platforms. And like, there's a lot of people seeing stuff leaving our atmosphere, and like when you see these sort of like these NASA shots and things like other craft that are kind of in our atmosphere and leaving our atmosphere, to me that kind of makes sense. If they've got people up there anyway, and they have had for a long time. I don't know if it's true, but I know that that's what Forrestal put out there before he died. So
you'd want to keep it quiet. And then I think the part of that, a lot of it, so when you tie it into it, even if you think about it, we just go right back to paper clips. All right. So we just brought all the Nazis over here. Their ideology stayed with them. And they probably, I think Jim Marrs, the book, The Fourth Reich, lays it out really succinctly. I mean, it's just amazing. The Fourth Reich by Jim Marrs is a great book, and it's scary as shit. And basically, I think the whole overview of the Fourth Reich is that the Nazis never lost. They just basically spread themselves out across the globe, considered themselves in like the highest levels of the biggest companies on the planet, and are either the top or close to the top of the boards of all of these companies, part of the military industrial complex, part of the actual militaries of all the other militaries and government and political systems all over the planet, and have done it all just kind of behind the scenes. And if you take that aspect, and that's all amazingly researched and documented, right? That book, The Fourth Reich. If you take that and you tie in the whole advanced technology, because you look at the Die Glock and what was the Hanabu and all the other supposed Nazi flying craft and all that. If you take that aspect of it and they just carried on that research, and some of it came here, some of it came whatever. If that's the case, then they actually have all the money on the planet. They have all the connections on the planet. They have additional resources and funding that we can't even imagine. And also technology that's it's being kept from us since at least the 30s or 40s. Right. So if that's the case, would it be, oh, sorry, we can't tell you about all this UFO shit because it's actually just Nazis that run the world?
Yeah, maybe. Well, could well be, man. Like, I mean,
you wouldn't tell anybody that at all. How would you come out and tell everybody, oh, hey, sorry, guys, we didn't want to say about UFOs because it's actually Nazis. They won. And yeah, sorry.
Well, it would be a very difficult pill for most people to swallow, wouldn't it? but I suppose when they've got a solar death ray pointed at them, it's like, okay, we can accept that. So I don't know. It's a tricky one, isn't it? Like, I believe it.
It's not any more outlandish than any other theory that's presented out there.
Is it as outlandish as Grace from Alpha? I don't know, Reticuli flying here in flying saucers, and I don't know, anal probing us. Like, seriously, I mean, I'd probably believe the Nazis invented spacecraft in the 1950s and actually, or 40s, and actually got to space than that. Let's be honest.
Yes,
like, I hate to say it, man. Especially considering as apparently it was a Nazi that came down and abducted Barney and Betty Hill.
Yeah, that's always overlooked, right? I mean, it's not overlooked, but I mean, nobody focuses on that shit at all. It was like basically a guy in a Nazi uniform. It was a Nazi, right?
Yeah.
And now, did you see Obama is doing Obama's? You know what I'm talking about, Jenna? Production company.
The Netflix, yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, they're doing a.
I'm sure it will not be accurately, told at all. I'm sure they're telling. I'm sure it'll be aliens.
Oh yeah, I bet you the Nazis left completely out, right?
Yeah.
You know what they apparently the Hills said when they were driving their car, like, and they started to see the light in the sky, because it was quite a long period of time apparently as they drove, and they saw this light above them and coming alongside them. Said that when they saw it, it was with a beep sound. It was like a rhythmical beep. It would just beep, beep, beep. The whole time. Yeah. So when you start looking into mind control, MK Ultra, most of the time when people are going to be hypnotized and they don't know about it, starts with a rhythmical beeping. Yeah. So start like acoustic audio frequencies. The whole thing, man. Like, it's just like, when you actually look at it and you look at it with eyes that aren't glazed by the need for it to be aliens, like, it's just, to me, it just is an op from day one. And it was, whether it was actual Nazis or whether it was someone dressed as a Nazi, but it was MK Ultra, like they literally landed a helicopter in front of them, or maybe some sort of secret craft, after beaming frequencies at them, this beeping sound, lights, like they were flashing lights at them, and then took them on board. And they even gave them, like, apparently, like, these aliens had books and said to Betty Hill, "You're welcome to take one of these books, yeah. It's got like secrets of our planet on and all that." But when she actually tried to leave, one of the other guys goes, "No, we think we better keep the book, yeah. Give the book back."
Yeah.
So it's like the whole thing is just hokey. So I'm going to be pretty interested to see. I mean, I'll eat my hat, and I'm always wearing one. I'll eat my hat, man, and I'll happily do it, and I'll do it like with relish. Like, if I'm proved wrong, but everything just stinks on that, man.
Yeah, there's a researcher on Twitter, his name's Tanner Boyle. He did a good thread about that. And there's so many details in like his regression and his telling of it that are like you never hear when you hear about the story, like ever. And there's one point where they describe what sounds like a roadblock in the road while they're driving, and it's people. I mean, it's men, it's not aliens. It's really weird. And you just can't deny how wrapped up MK Ultra is with all this stuff. I mean, it obviously is. So it's really fun to like weed through what's like genuine, not human activity and what's, I don't know. It's really muddy water.
Well, as Valea said what was one book that what he said he knows of, or he knows that other governments have faked abductions, or I can't remember the exact quote, but you know what I'm talking about? He said that he knows of faked alien abductions.
I think it was us. Wasn't it the US that the CIA was doing it? I mean, even Richard Doty said that,
In Brazil as well, which is where a lot of the cases that he looked at were like they were fake, they were doing it to Brazilians. So it's like twisted, man. It's twisted.
They said something like, we have the technology and they've done it on occasion. Like they've done the fake alien abductions. And it's one of the things in DeLong's books, the Secret Machines books too, as well. It's like one of the characters gets abducted and she's like, and there's grays but she's not drugged up enough that she ends up punching one and the mask falls off. And it's like, I think in the book, I could be wrong, that they're Russians or something, right? Or some other country, but it's like, and she's not even in a craft. It's like a warehouse or some shit. Right. And it's like, the whole thing is staged and she's drugged, but she's cognitive enough to know they're just people in suits. It's like,
well, it's like, when Whitley Strieber, like he, I can't remember which book it was, but he wrote about an experience, real life experience. Because obviously, when you dig into his story, years before any of this abduction stuff, he had been over in London, apparently, making sort of avant-garde documentary films with the Process Church.
Ooh,
you know about that?
I forgot about that.
Or around that. But in the meantime, he told a story about how he'd been seduced by some kind of mysterious Irish woman, and she was beautiful, a seductress, yeah. And he said he never fully felt in control around her. And then he had this kind of strange affair with her. But then she had a bag with her, like an overnight bag or a little suitcase or something. And in the suitcase, he looked in the suitcase and there was literally like what was an alien grey suit. Yeah.
What?
And he said it freaked him out. He said it looked like so organic and real. It was an outfit in this case, and he just freaked and ran away. Yeah. So there's certain elements to it where you go, like, he was getting dragged into something kind of in swinging 60s, 70s London. Got involved with the Process Church. And there's a story about him being chased across the rooftops of London by Process Church members with dogs during this whole thing too. So the guy was, when you look at what happened with him and the lead up to his abduction story, he was balls deep in some dark shit, man. Whether he was part of it or not, I mean, a lot of these earlier stories talk about how he was naval intelligence, or he was doing work on behalf of naval intelligence. So whether he was spying against the Process or whatever, obviously he pissed them off because they came after him. And then
his father was in MK Ultra, right?
Yeah. Well, by all accounts, yeah.
Allegedly, his father was
all
military.
All of these things were allegedly.
Allegedly, his father was naval intel or something in psychic research, right? Or I could be wrong, but I'm sure that he grew up on a Navy base or something like that, and his dad was into mind control
there
research.
Was paperclip Nazis, ex-Nazis in the paperclip program at that base. And he talks about how he had memories of being put into a Skinner box. Is it a Skinner box? Like the
Skinner box, yeah. As a kid, right? As a kid? Like it, as a child.
Yeah. So he's going on to this base with his dad. His dad obviously was being like cajoled or being encouraged into the idea that his son will benefit in some way from this, I'm guessing. Unless, I don't know why his dad allowed it to happen. And the next thing you know, he's being put through what seems like it was probably MK Ultra. It's pretty wild. But again, in terms of in terms of like setting up a narrative, like the stuff he came out with after that was all ideologically based as well, and it was around Ishtar, and that grey alien that he said he saw, the main one, was female, and to him came across as being Ishtar, so Inanna or Isis. So like, you know, from day one, man, like the modern, not even modern is it, but like the more modern stories are all trying to sow this narrative of gods, the ancient gods, goddesses, which is what DeLong's been talking about. You go back to the 9 again, the DuPont stuff we've been talking about, and you know, again, gods, goddesses, the ancients, like so yeah, it's all goes to the same place. It's the retelling of the ancient myths and the rebirth of the old gods. Maybe I'm wrong, man. Maybe like the old gods are real. Like, John, you'll know more. You're a 32-degree Freemason. I'm guessing you've met ISIS, yeah?
I've never worshipped ISIS. Okay, I can say that. I've never had. I've never seen an ISIS statue.
Have you met her? Yeah.
Well, that vision I had, remember I told you about? I don't know if that was ISIS or Hathor or whoever the hell she was, but it seemed like that, right? It seemed like that type of entity, you know, all in white, cloaked, hooded, whatever. Well, not hooded, but you know, then just presenting me with the sword thing, and that was weird. I was like, I don't want to do this shit.
Seems to be pretty common occurrence for a few people out there, like the seeing lady and stuff. But yeah, again, it's like,
I think if there is anything real, it's something like the Jungian idea of like the archetypes, you know, and they kind of can communicate with us through our subconscious. You know, I kind of think it's half psychological and maybe half metaphysical type of thing. I mean, even Jung was involved with like the OSS, you know, so he must have known something that they agreed with, you know what I mean? I don't know. I think there's something to it. I just don't know what it is. And I don't think it's aliens.
No, yeah. I don't think so either. Or not in the way that we understand them. We call them that, right?
Well, everything that I think, like, over these years and stuff, like, it's all come back down to any kind of real feeling of something bigger than us or me, or I can't speak for myself, but it's been synchronicities, and it's been patterns, you know, like where things lead you to certain things, or intuition, like it all seems like external to me. And so at times in our little research group, it seems external to all of us. So that's my closest feeling of actually the reality behind all that. That there's something kind of spinning a web, and sometimes you can get caught in it.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people think that you create synchronicities, and maybe that's true to an extent. But for me, like, I'll have a synchronicity, and I don't know why I'm having the synchronicity. And, you know, I'll make a note of it, whatever it is, you know, and then a month later, I'll have another synchronicity about something else. And then I figure out that the two things are connected in a way. You know, it'll be a word or an idea or a story or something. And then, you know, later on, I'll find out that they're connected. And I couldn't do that on my own without the knowledge, you know, without the pre-existing knowledge. So it's, you know, I've learned a lot through synchronicities. So, and I kind of think that's the point.
Well, again, the Jungian stuff, like, I mean, because I agree with you, like, Jung's, like, for me, is like been a major help to get me through a lot of this stuff. Sounds crazy. I've said it before on one of these, but it has, because it makes sense. What he wrote makes sense. So the concept of like the collective unconscious, like, if there's, you know, eons of experience that's getting put into the makeup of what a human being is, and our common shared histories, and that's what we're drawing on. Or whether it's like, you know, and that's why we're seeing things like the lady, or you know, these images that become part of our archetypes, and then with the synchronicities, the fact that we're all dipping into the same knowledge pool without really knowing it. I don't know. I mean, it makes sense to me. Like, and Jung, I suppose, like, is probably how I met you, Jenna. Like, because of all that sort of study off the back of the Bledsoes and Hathor, and the fact that you found that stuff in the Red Book where the patient had met or had dreams about the solar goddess Hathor, and then obviously John Warner, like, his family heavily connected to Jung through the what they called Bollinger Society.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So there's all that as well. Like, so it goes deep.
All the stuff about
there's synchronicities.
Serious?
Sorry, go on.
Like that started with the Bledsoe stuff for me. Like I started connecting Hathor to Sirius, and then I started having just like crazy synchronicities related to Sirius, which I didn't know anything about before. And then I was just like everywhere. Like I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother conversation.
Seriously.
But...
Well, I think that like it is. It's one that I'd really like to have, but that's probably another whole.
That's 2 hours easy
conversation, isn't it? Yeah. But you can see though, like, in the history of all this stuff, a lot of people who've really dug into it, a lot of people end up with Sirius playing a big part in it. Now, whether that's by design or again, it's like decades of myth making that have gone before us, but everything seems to end up with Sirius. Like, I think that when you end up with the 1940s and Jack Parsons and the birth of NASA and the stuff, the secret societies in California and stuff like that, they were all looking for Sirius too. It was all Sirius related stuff, wasn't it?
Yeah, and Crowley was all about, his Order of the Silver Star was Sirius, and his his guide or whatever was from Sirius.
Iowas, the gray alien Iowas, yeah.
And then you got the Astrum Argentium doing their secret rituals out of Palomar, and you got up to now TTSA, where you've got their logo is a 5-pointed star of Sirius.
Yeah,
it all links together. Like, I mean,
I remember the R2 dogs. Do you remember that?
R2 dogs?
Yeah, R2 dogs. Yeah, absolutely.
LLC. Yeah.
Which all fits. Which I think when you run it through gematria, it actually comes out as the same as Order Out of Chaos.
Oh yeah.
Of course it does. Of course it does. One of the things I was thinking is like the only reason that any of these intelligence agencies would be involved in any of these secret societies or any of these ritualistic things is if they worked, or they didn't work, but they could be used as manipulation for something, or something. You know what I mean? Like it would be a tool for some reason, like to manipulate people that believe that they work or whatever, right? Or the other side of it is that works in some form or fashion, right? And that they're used, like remote viewing, they came out and denied that it worked forever, right? But then you got guys like Joe McMonagle that comes out and said, yeah, I've been doing it for 40 years or 50 years or whatever, right? I've been doing it for the government, I've been doing it for other organizations and all this stuff. And then the government's like, oh yeah, okay, well, it's not enough that, for us to work, and we stopped studying it. Well, bullshit. They've been still doing it, and they still have contractors like McMonagle, and those people are still doing it. So what's not to say that the other part of that is true as well. It goes back to the whole, what I'm trying to put together right now is the whole Collins Elite thing. Because when TTSA, I think this was on early on, when they were really pushing the narrative with Elizondo and those guys for a while, was that there was the Collins Elite. There's a group of people within the government that are highly religious, and they don't want this to be studied because they say it's demonic, right? And then that triggered everybody to be like, well, what the hell are they thinking? They're just religious zealots and they're nuts and all this stuff, right? So what if the whole occult and the ritualistic things tie into whatever these, we call them aliens, whatever, incorporeal entities or whatever, like non-corporeal beings, right? What if that shit is real? You do these, like CE5 is real, right? Or a heist, whatever. I mean, I know that it's real because I've done it and it's worked, right? And so like, if that's real, remote viewing's real, who's to say that these occult things that they're doing, whatever these rituals aren't producing some type of results? And say you are right-wing religious and you find out about it, and it's like, well, wait a minute, what are you guys doing? You're doing a ceremony to fucking ISIS and trying to call in UFOs, and you guys are summoning the devil. And like, I mean, to me, potentially that makes sense, right?
Well, yeah, absolutely. But I mean, but the thing is, though, what have people been? We talked about this the other day. Like, what have good Christian people, been doing for centuries?
Burning everybody at the stake who didn't believe what they believed in.
Yeah, they've been like burning witches, burning pagans, like torturing people who didn't do exactly what they wanted or what they believed. Right. And prior to that, for literally centuries, people worshipped the ancient gods. Mm-hmm. It does seem to me like those ancient gods that they worshipped, from the other research that I like doing, was Diana or Artemis, which God of nature, which when you talk about like, the proper, who do the Illuminati worship, the elites or whatever, or whoever it may be, if there is an elite who worship a weird god or goddess or whatever it may be, which one is it? And it does seem like it probably is Artemis or Diana. But that's a whole other conversation too, yeah. But it all ties into this stuff as well, and it keeps on coming back for me anyway. That might just be a personal thing, to be honest, but it does for my research. It keeps on coming back to that, yeah.
No, it's documented. I mean, there's a lot of it's documented, right? Like Freya, the things, the Earth goddess, things like that. All of those are tied to that, and I mean, we know for a fact. I mean, just through the Community 300 and Warner's stuff, is that you have these people with a lot of money and a lot of resources that have alternative beliefs than the majority, than the masses do, right? The commoners or whatever. Mm-hmm. I mean, they have different ceremonies and clubs and whatever else, right? And that's not made up. That's, you can look into some of that stuff, right? I mean, look at that whole Bohemian Grove thing. That's fucking nuts right there. I mean, just that in itself. And even if they play it off, or they treat it as just a what is it? I think we were talking about, they use it as more of a to weed people out, to see if they're going to go along with their even worse shit that they want to do or whatever. They use it as like a I don't know, filtering mechanism to find people that are willing to go to the other level of that kind of shit. I mean, if that's even the case, then you have that higher level of whatever. And who's to say that maybe they have worshiped Artemis for 100,000 years and whatever they do works, and they are able to keep their wealth or attain knowledge or whatever the fuck else that us normal people don't.
Well, this is it. It's like, I mean, if it works, like, thousands of years of pagans around the world suddenly getting it blinked out by the Catholic Church, because maybe they found something that works, and then secret societies continuing the worship of Diana, Artemis. I mean, Scientology, Dianetics, Diana. He called Diana Hubbard, like Ron Hubbard called his daughter Diana, called his first boat, Scientology boat, Diana. The Queen and the royal family, based off research done by people in the 50s and 60s and before that, said that the royal family secretly worship Diana, Artemis. The witch cult Wicca and the original witch cult, like all based on Diana worship. It seems like there's something in it,
And how's it tied into UFOs, Jenna? Go ahead. How's that all tie into UFOs? But no, go ahead. I'm sorry. Yeah, okay.
I was just saying that, like, when I was comparing a lot of the goddess figures from different cultures, I noticed in a lot of them they were described as like either the queen, of heaven, or the mother of the gods, so she's like the one who creates the gods, so maybe by having some kind of connection with her, or whatever, the feminine principle, there's the belief that you become godlike, I guess. I don't know. That's kind of the whole Gnostic concept too,
the divine feminine. The divine feminine, divine masculine. That's one of, Duane Keir, that did, talk to her in her books, and, it's the whole return to the divine feminine thing, and she's channeling a group that, that's called a consortium, right? And that group basically is just a loose group of, they say loose, a group of various different entities and spirits and whatever else you want to call it, that are trying to usher in a change in humanity via the union between the divine feminine and the divine masculine, to birth the divine human, I guess. I can't, maybe I get there. I know it's the between the two is the birth, the divine feminine, divine masculine. They said, basically, from what she's saying, is that divine feminine did rule, was worshipped, all this stuff for eternity. And then basically, I don't know if it was the Catholic Church or somewhere along the lines, was cut, and you lose that whole entire aspect. You hold the feminine aspect, and it's the masculine aspect, and that whole entire thing is severed. So there's no union of humans because of the division between the masculine and the feminine. And what needs to happen and is happening is that the occurrence of the feminine is coming back in, and should supposedly recreate the balance or whatever. So I don't know if that all ties in, but it does make sense if people start all over the world start having more Marian apparitions, right? There's the feminine's returning. There's more of a feminine energy, things like that. Aquarius, the age of Aquarius all ties into supposedly some of that too. So,
but this is all like, again, it's sort of like, it's a tricky one, because if this stuff is being fed to us, and we've looked into the psychic element of feeding visions to people using technology like, voice to skull or frequency-based psychedelic experiences or whatever it may be, like, or dentistry. Like,
I still don't ever want to go to the fucking dentist again.
no. Like, but again, it does come down to this idea that, like, if you're gonna start a new movement in society, if you're gonna start something like that, usually you need a deity, if it's a religion anyway, or if it's going to be a culture change, and that's what the Age of Aquarius is all about, isn't it? Like, I mean, the New Age and spirituality is a revision of the Old Age. Gods, goddesses, the bringing together of balance, nature worship. Like, it is essentially going back to pre-Christian times. So the concept of the New Age in itself is what I think that these people are trying to bring in. So whether they can generate belief in that through using advanced MK Ultra techniques, and I'm including on myself, like, experiences that I've had that maybe, like, I've picked up on something and that's not something real, it could be projected. I don't know, but these people aren't stupid either. So if I was going to be trying to do this en masse, what I'd probably be doing is looking at some of the world's best thinkers into psychology and things like archetypes and the gods and the goddesses and mysticism. So I'd end up with Carl Jung and people like him, and then I'd be looking at what he was believing and what he was looking at, and then I'd probably try to replicate it. And that seems exactly what's happening. It's this idea of the principle of the New Age, and there'll be a lot of people who hate me for saying this, because a lot of the New Age stuff I really like is purely about societal change, whether it's real or not, and I'm not too sure, but, like, it is all just about people bringing in a change.
Yeah, conscious and to the subconscious, right, as well, not consciously and subconsciously,
and subconsciously, yeah. But at the same time, like, if it's not, well, you get into what the nature of what is real. I mean, like, if somebody's feeding you decades of stories and a new mythos, is that real? I mean, your response to it, whether you suddenly decide, all right, I'm going to become a nature lover, a New Age spiritual chat, I'm going to meditate every day, and all these things that, let's be honest, I do a lot of these things myself. But, like, yeah, so I'm a sucker to it. But I know that as I get older and I read more, I look at it and go, well, this could have just been created. I mean, like, I was born in 1977, and that's when a lot of this stuff was getting pushed. Yeah, the Age of Aquarius, like, 70. Spielberg was putting out E.T., Close Encounters. You've got, like, it's off the back end of the hippie movement. Like, you've got books coming out about the rainbow and the serpent and all that stuff. Like, the Gnostic texts are starting to get talked about again. Like, it's the full rebirth of it. And if that's all you've lived through, to you it could become absolutely real. Yeah. So I think we're, like, in a pretty advanced stage of how society is being crafted. And if you're in the UFO world, you enjoy reading that stuff, you're way deeper into it than a lot of people are going to be. That's my opinion, anyway.
No, yeah, I think you're onto it, man. I think that's it. I mean, Carl Gustav Jung is a big, powerful force, and we know that he was in the OSS, right, and all the other things, right? So, and what does he have, 2 books or 3 books on UFOs? I can't remember. I know there's
one. I think it's there's just one. Yeah, I think so.
But that one's quoted all over the place. It's called Flying Saucers. Yeah,
I love how it's just called Flying Saucers.
Flying Saucers. You're studying his work up until that point. And you're like, oh, he's got a new book coming out. It's called Flying Saucers. What the fuck? All right.
Yeah.
But yeah,
bestseller.
Yeah,
everyone's down the shop there. That one.
It's like Jesus. But I mean, there's the whole nature spirit, and then I don't know. I think it goes against the grain with some of this. Like, how do you explain to a right wing militia that's, all full of masculinity and everything, that there's a return of the divine feminine that's tied to UFOs and the change in consciousness on the planet? Like, you get this whole divergent aspect of it that it'll never happen for. I mean, so like, I don't know where that whole thing leads to, because if that's the predominant thing, is there really opposing forces? Is it just another one of those things that keep us chasing our tails, so we're not looking at the real thing? I mean, probably.
Well, I suppose, like, I mean, like the modern right wing, like, what did a right wing stand against? Like, they usually stand against other cultures, don't they? They stand against Islam, Judaism, like colors, like rates of racial hatred and stuff like that. But like, when I think about, like, kind of like a lot of the focus for militia stuff seems to have been born of the wars against Islamic countries like Iraq, Afghanistan, all that stuff. Yeah. Right. So a lot of that stuff seems to come from that, and people being veterans of those wars, of those conflicts, and going over there and being told that these people are your enemy. Yeah. Yeah. And what's one common thing to latch onto about those cultures, if you want to find something to dislike, and it would be their second-class citizenship of females. Yeah. Like, so in terms of like selling a message like the return of the divine feminine to a white militiaman in America based on their hatred of a group of people who supposedly hate women, that's a good way to sell it. Yeah. There
you go.
Like,
you're right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So these super masculine people, though, like, a lot of the time when I read about militias, so you got, like, ideologically, their enemies supposedly don't like women. Well, they do, but that's what they're told. Their families in militias and in those kind of like groups of people hold women and their families close. Like, they're strong players in it. The idea of family values, conservative family values. Like, so selling a new age message to a Nazi probably won't be that hard.
You're good. You're so smart, John. Jenna, what do you think?
But then you I don't know. See, I kind of think a lot of humans have a natural tendency to gravitate towards good things, but I also think that whenever there's some kind of organized uprising of people, organic, it's infiltrated. Like even the hippie movement, you would look at that was totally infiltrated by the military industrial complex and the CIA. And so I don't know, even feminism, I think that's been kind of weaponized. I just think it all gets weaponized to serve the system or whatever. So I don't know.
Divide and conquer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any movement seems to get infiltrated and then turned into something shitty. Like, it's like there's always a way of dividing us. So it's kind of like, like you said then, it's like with feminism, you got feminism like a noble pursuit for like many, 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 many years. Yeah. And then it gets almost turned against. Yeah, what's the most recent thing? LGBT, like, so you got like transsexuals.
I feel like that's become like such a circus on purpose. I feel like it really like delegitimizes, the whole movement. I feel like they're purposely making it a circus so that people hate it.
Well, exactly. So all of a sudden you've got like, so what used to be the people fighting for their freedom are now being called bigots. So feminists, a lot of feminists who say, what does being a woman actually mean? What does that equate to? And I have no opinion on this, I'm going to say, but in terms of looking at a culture war, you can see how they do it. And it's like, well, all right, so now these people this massive group of people, females, who fought for their rights for all these years are now being demonized in some regards for their opinions on what actually women are. Yeah. It's insanity. Like, so for me, looking into it, and not having an opinion in either way. You see it. You see how it's just people get turned on each other, And it's like
I've seen it in ufology. Just for there was that whole women of ufology movement that happened. I mean, I think it's probably still happening, but that was maybe a year or 2 years ago. I don't know, but there was like a big thing where there was a lot of women that actually got together and was like, we're being basically subjugated and, nobody's listening to us. There's Jenna and, hear any of that or see any of that when that was all going on?
I don't know. I'm not really involved with the UFO Twitter stuff. I was, when I first started, that's where I started. And then I kind of went other places. And it's just, to me, it's so myopic. So I don't really pay attention to, honestly.
Oh yeah, no, it's cool. I mean, it was just one of those
Except
things,
for you
though.
guys. I don't really pay attention to the UFOs.
Yeah, no, I mean, but it was just a thing where it was just like, well, yeah, women are, completely sorely misrepresented, and like whenever anybody would, a woman that come up would speak, people would just attack her, in a lot of different situations. It would just, be like,
well,
it's insane.
That's the other thing. Some of those UFO people are just insane.
Well, it's like, I mean, so I'm with you, Jenna. Like, yeah, I talk about UFOs a lot, but I talk about conspiracy more.
Yeah, and you talk about history,
mythology and history. Yeah,
looking at how it's all connected.
And I've never used actually, somebody will probably search and find I have, but I never use the hashtag UFO Twitter because that isn't what I'm up to. Like, I think that it's become, like you say, it's too myopic. It's sort of, it puts you into a bracket and into a community, which I'm not against, but it's not one that I'm actually part of. Like, quite honestly, I'm just not. And I think that from what I can see, they're a bunch of cannibals anyway. Yeah, because as soon as you join that community, they just eat you.
Yeah,
spit you out the other side, man. And it's really ugly. Like, it's just really ugly. And also, like, from this, the stuff we've talked about for the last hour and a half, some of the names that we've talked about, who probably are big parts of playing to the UFO Twitter sphere, are all being, let's face it, a lot of these names are being manipulated by mind control, societal change. Like, so take away the UFOs, keep the conspiracy, and that's where you're at with me anyway. And Jenna, so I agree with you, Jenna. John, you?
I got into the whole thing, and I didn't know there was a thing. When I got the UFO Twitter, I just I think I heard it on Coast to Coast episode at one point, and I was like, well, what the hell's this, right? So then I got into it, and I've seen it for the limited time that I've been there. I don't know, it's a couple of years or whatever, but I've seen it turn into this politicized infighting. There's definitely agents of, there's agents in all over the place, right? I mean, they've even admitted to it. And I think some of the Twitter file stuff recently came out, whole Elon Musk Twitter files about how much government involvement in Twitter there is, like a lot, right? Like a lot. There's a lot of
big time.
Yeah, I mean, there's like definitely a huge campaign in there, right? So the government's reading all this shit, they're involved in it. There's fake accounts that are, pushing people's perceptions one way or the other way, and there's manipulation going on all fronts there, and you can definitely see it. I mean, it drove Warner off of Twitter for like a long time, right? Because anytime you post anything, you got attacked by bots or people, or fake accounts or real people or whatever. Like, anytime you got posted anything, it was just got piled on with just the most outrageous shit, And it's like, well, it's basically just another arm of disinformation at this point.
Well, he's in a unique position, being a blood relative of one of the biggest players in what I consider to be a major government op. Like, so yeah, he's speaking out against something like that. He's got balls, to be honest, to do it. Like, enough respect.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't care. I made a little YouTube short of him just saying that his cousin's lying, from one of the talk that you and I did with him, and here's why. And like, anytime that he posts shit about, he posts right on Chris Mellon's Twitter, he's like, yep, hey, you're part of this too. And he doesn't come out right out and say that he's wrong and he's completely leading everybody down the path, but I think he's, from the last tweets or whatever, he's basically saying he's only telling half truths, or the little bit of it, or little parts of it where there's way more of it and there needs to be more pushing, and I think that's what his biggest thing about it is. But there's all of that shit going on there. So I don't know. I think there's, at times though, I do think that there's ways that, how the government will just slip shit out every once in a while just to see what happens. I think that's probably a case for UFO Twitter, where they'll throw a bunch of fake shit out and see how many people jump on top of it, or they'll throw real shit out and everybody go, oh, that's fake, and they'll use it as a gauge to figure out what's going on. I mean, basically it's like a MK Ultra 2.0 in some regards.
Well, it's almost as well. It's like it's almost like they're having fun. Like when these stories are being created, it's like, like the idea, and again, we talked about this the other day, but like the idea that Admiral Nimitz was the commanding officer for L. Ron Hubbard, and that Catalina Island, where apparently, you know, there's the video of Lou Elizondo and his hippie friend,
Kay Hill, yeah,
like drive sailing out there and stuff out there. And that's where apparently he wrote Dianetics. Yeah, so like, you know.
Well, then it ties into the stuff that there's other research too that you guys have done. Is that Dietrich, right? Is it Jenna? What?
Oh, so Alex, yeah. Alex. So Jean-Luc found the thing about her. Is it her uncle, her great uncle, or her grandfather?
Something like that. A great uncle, or I can't remember which one, but yeah.
Yeah,
maybe grandfather. It might have been grandfather.
So this isn't a whole nother thing. I don't know how long you guys have. I gotta go soon, but
oh yeah. Whenever you gotta go, it's no big deal.
Like okay.
But the modern narrative spinning is like, the Nimitz encounter, and then Dietrich's thing is
and then that gets into this whole other thing of connections with weird things. But so I guess it was her grandfather was a sci-fi writer for Amazing Stories, which, that's the Ray Palmer thing. He was also a member of the German and American rocket societies. And then her uncle was Thomas Starzl, who was like the father of modern transplantation. So transplant surgery, basically.
Organ transplants, right? From like hearts, lungs, all that shit.
Transhumanism.
Because it gets weird. But
What his name was the guy that wrote for the Amazing Adventures or Amazing Stories was Roman Starzl. That's it, one of the Roman Starzl. And like so he was writing these old adventure stories back at the same time as people like Lovecraft were. So, in terms of seeding stories and ideas, and the fact that then he comes back around all these years later and these big players in these things are related.
And then,
some of these old names,
Right. And the whole Ray Palmer, who's the guy who did Amazing Stories, he wrote a book with Kenneth Arnold. He's connected to the Fred Crispin thing, with the Maury Island. Like it's all connected. It's all good. It's all circular. I don't know. And then there's the whole Scientology connection too. Like you were just talking about with L. Ron Hubbard and the Nimitz thing. And, you've got Hal Puthoff and you've got all these RV, remote viewers guys who are at the Scientology. That was another thing. That was another reason I was just done with UFO Twitter, because I started asking questions about that and they, I was getting attacked for it. I'm like, why can't I ask about it? Why? Why is this off topic?
There's loads of Scientologists on there.
But I can't ask questions.
Scary,
I'm not interested. I don't want to be a part of a group where I can't ask questions, because that's what I'm here for. I want to learn what's going on. I want to know the truth. If I'm not allowed to ask questions, then.
But that's why Twitter is a great tool to stop people asking questions, because all it's doing is funneling you down the same path. It's giving you the story to follow. It's giving you the celebrities or the names to follow, and then hammering you when you step out of it.
Right. And keeping you, on this little carrot on a thread, be like, oh, it's coming, disclosure's coming.
Yeah.
Wow. Do you see the latest thing is I haven't watched Green Street's newest video that he put out, but basically he went to Skinwalker Ranch, and all I saw was a tweet that he retweeted from Travis Taylor saying, "Hey, I'd never said that I was Mormon, a former Mormon, or currently I'm Mormon, or whatever." And I was like, okay. So then I sometimes I just like say shit. So I just said, so Green Street, what's your theory? What's your theory with Mormonism in Skinwalker Ranch? And then it was just like blowing up, right? Like everybody just went into this whole thing, and somebody was basically like, well, if you're dumb enough to believe Mormonism, then you're dumb enough to believe all the shit that happens at Skinwalker Ranch. And then Travis Taylor came back in and was basically going, I'm not saying one religion's better than another. They all have their, and then it just kept going, and it was just going and going and going. But basically Green Street was like, Travis Taylor was the only one that would not meet with me and wasn't there, and he's not a Mormon. And everybody else that was there was Mormon. And I'm going, well, duh, I've been looking into this forever, right? That's, even if it's not, it has to be, there has to be something to it. But the Mormon religion ties heavily into Freemasonry, right? That's where my interest always is because Joseph Smith was a Freemason who basically stole all of the degrees and made up whatever, had all this shit happen, and then created the Mormon church was basically as a copy of the first 3 degrees of Masonry and all this other shit that's thrown in there. And then most people that aren't Freemasons and are just Mormons have no idea. And I've met some people that actually are Masons and became Mormon, which still blows my mind. I've talked to a guy that became Mormon after being Christian his whole life. He was a Mason, and then he was like, "Whoa, it's so much like Freemasonry." I'm like, "Holy shit!" I mean, so you look at that, and it's like, all right, because in Skinwalker Ranch, there's like a square and compass carved in one of the rocks up there, and all these other things. So I'm thinking, man, how does this all tie together? So there's that whole infighting now, where Travis Taylor saying he never was a Mormon, he isn't a Mormon. Everybody else is a Mormon, but Greenstreet was a former Mormon himself, right? So,
do you think that Travis Taylor is a Freemason though?
I don't know. I don't think so. I don't know. I've never really looked into it.
Hasn't he written some books back in? I can't remember. I remember reading something. Hasn't he got some books out on the sort of mysteries? I don't know actually. Check that.
Yeah. One of the guy from Museum of Tarot, Brett, he kind of goes at him hard in a couple of his TikTok videos and stuff. He wrote a book about like manifestation or something. Travis Taylor wrote a book about manifestation and and then some other things, but I haven't. His dad was huge in rocketry back in the day in Alabama, so NASA and all the rocketry stuff too, and that was around the whole paperclip time maybe as well. Yeah. So I know that his whole family is part of that culture in the rocketry and all that stuff too. But I don't know. I've never actually put that together to see if Travis Taylor would be a Freemason or not.
Is he Travis S. Taylor? That's him,
so.
isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So The Science Behind the Secret, Decoding the Law of Attraction by Travis S. Taylor, PhD.
Yeah.
So that was like before. And then he's got loads of what look like fantasy books.
Yeah, he's like
a Tau Ceti agenda series. So yeah, it sounds to me like he's, like the sort of wording of that, the fact he's got a book series called the Tau Ceti Agenda, yeah.
Science fiction writer, right? He's a science fiction writer.
I'm speculating, so what do I know?
I don't know. Jenna, what do you think?
I don't know. I don't know enough about him, and I haven't really been following the Skinwalker Ranch thing because I just think it's all bullshit. So I'm not the right person to ask about that.
It's like Scooby-Doo, isn't it?
It is. Zoinks.
I just think if it was anything real, it wouldn't be on a stupid reality show on the History Channel.
Well, what interests me though is that, like, again, I'm like you. I look at Skinwalker and it looks like a cartoon, yeah. Like you got like this grim-looking security expert who carries a machine gun just in case a trans-dimensional werewolf attacks. Like, come on, man! Like seriously, like please. And then, Jesus, it's just anyway. But what does fascinate me though, are obviously the other links. So then you got like the fact they bought it from Bigelow. I think, is he a Mormon?
I don't know. I've never been able to figure that out. Somebody said he wasn't. I don't know. I always assumed he was, but I don't think he is.
I mean, Jacques Vallée's been down there visiting. Like, so you got like some big names. Like, it's interesting, isn't it? So you get like a lot of this stuff. It all plays into like the sort of the big narrative stuff. Yeah. Well, yeah, I think it's a load of bullshit. Skinwalker Ranch.
I don't know. I think it's probably one of the soft disclosure things too, and just to get people into the idea. I mean, I let my wife actually read The Hunt for the Skinwalker, that George Lutasky, whatever, that the latest book that came out, and it freaked her out, right? Because it was all about, the things that follow you home, like the hitchhikers and shit. And she was freaked out about that, and it's like the werewolves and all that other shit. So she's always like, "Don't bring shit back over to my house," and I'm like. She's always worried about me getting everybody abducted or werewolves now showing up because I'm going somewhere. And it's like,
it was Skinwalkers though, man. Like, when you actually look at, because Whitley Strieber did that book and got turned into a movie back in the 80s called The Howl. Was it The Howling or Wolfen? Is it Wolfen?
Wolfen. Yeah, Wolfen.
Yeah.
Wolfen. So Wolfen, I forgot all about it. Wolfen.
But Wolfen goes into the idea of what the Skinwalkers were. So, like, you got the Native American guys who channel the energy of an animal. So
shapeshift,
even to the point where they show the scene where he goes out into the main character who's supposed to be like a Navajo Indian or something, goes out and strips off naked, goes onto the beach, becomes like a wolf. He's always a man, But yeah, he laps at the water in the sunlight and he howls at the moon and everything. He never changes into a wolf, but he says he feels the power of it, yeah. And he even explains that to the character. But when you look into the real Native American skinwalkers, they were black magicians. So they were doing ritual sacrifices. They were doing, apparently, like, they had to like do something so awful to open up the power to themselves. And I think they called it something like the moral event horizon. So there's no coming back from it. As soon as you go over that moral event horizon, you have to do something truly awful, which will then give you the power of the black magician skinwalkers. And that usually was to kill a close family member, somebody that you're supposed to love.
That ties into the movie you told me to watch, The Northman, where that whole Germanic Nordic tribe basically became, they were like wolves, right? I mean, they kind of were lapping at the ground and stuff. And have you ever seen that movie, Jenna? It's pretty cool. It's called The Northman. We watched it. It's all based on psychedelic mushrooms and everything as well. And you know, there's at some point where this dog is like after this guy, and this guy just growls at this dog, and the dog because it's
freaking out. Right?
Yeah, I know. That's what I was gonna say. Your dog's freaking out, but I mean, it's like, you know, they imbue the spirit of these animals or whatever at that point, and they do it through like ceremony mushrooms and like, you know, magic ceremonies and all this evil shit. And it's like, I don't know. That goes back to the nature spirit stuff again, right? Like, what's going on there? Is that what it is?
And what is the nature of our reality? What are we? What are we capable of? And you know, like, and that's a big part of Wolfen too. I mean, there is obviously sort of a crazy, weird element in the story in Wolfen. There's a race of advanced wolves in it. Do you remember the story?
I can't believe that was Whitley Strieber. Everybody forgets that Whitley Strieber just makes up fiction, right? Like,
the weird thing to me was the cover of that book. There's a version of the book that has the Twin Towers on it and the wolf face in the middle. And just like,
Oh, that came up like a few months ago. You were digging into that whole Twin Tower thing.
Yeah, I found that. Like,
I forgot about that.
Well, like in the Wolfen, like, because this advanced, it's like a pack of wolves basically that are evolutionary perfect. So they've evolved alongside humans, but they've kept themselves quiet. So they're intelligent and smart. And what they do is they hang around they can't be that smart, but they obviously need a lot of food. And they're like eating humans. So they hang around in the ghettos of New York. Eating humans, yeah. Like, it's actually a pretty good movie. When I watched it, I was like, I enjoyed it.
The movie. I didn't see it.
Watch it. Honestly, it's decent. It's decent, yeah. Like, I mean, it's old now, but it's enjoyable. And when it gets into the Skinwalker stuff, it's interesting, especially the fact it's Whitley Strieber that wrote it, yeah. Like, it's fascinating.
I think the majority of people forget that Whitley Strieber is a science fiction author. Like all of the majority of the shit that he is fucking made up. So but then you go Communion, which is real, right? Like, okay,
well, he had a book called Cat Magic. That was one of his first books about a community of modern day witches and sorcerers living in an American town, working on breaking the mystery of life after death. Yeah,
there you go.
And yeah,
that's what Bigelow's doing now. Isn't that Bigelow switch from on the Skinwalker Ranch, and that's his big deal is the communication. Like Jeffrey Mishlove got $500,000 whatever for writing an essay about proving the existence of life after death. And
well, it's almost like this stuff's written, like it's written for him, you know, like almost like, here you go, guys, here's the playbook. You know, Whitley wrote it 25 years for us. Get stuck in. But like, because in Cat Magic, like they're I guess they're Wiccans. They worship the goddess and everything, you know, and some kind of cat form of the goddess that comes at night and does this shit. But they do rituals, and they're all writers and professors and middle class like academics and like Whitley Strieber. It's almost kind of like, he's like the guy's stuff, even though it's sci-fi, it's biographical. Like he's writing about what I believe and other people believe. That's what he was just writing about his own experiences. I mean, who's that awesome guy who did the research on him? You put him on to me, the British guy, Jenna.
Which one?
He wrote about Whitley Strieber and
Jason Horsley.
Jason Horsley, yeah.
That book is really good.
Amazing. I mean, his books are incredible, yeah. And that's so well researched. But his book is so well done that you can't come back from that.
Yeah, exactly.
Like when you read it, it's like, well, there's no way I can actually really believe any of this now.
And plus, he's like kind of an insider because his family was so connected, politically and
Yeah,
socially, so
absolutely. I mean, that's a big recommendation.
Jason Horsley, what was it called?
It's called Prisoner of Infinity.
Yeah.
Prisoner of Infinity.
And then he's got another one, another book that I read actually before that.
That's a tough
What's that one called?
The Vice of Kings.
The Vice of Kings, yeah.
That's a tough one. That's rough. That's all about pedophilia and stuff. That's a rough read.
Yeah.
It's also really good though, because it's again really well researched and
ties into the historical elite use of pedophilia as control and black magic, like everything that like people who are brave enough to get into that stuff, it feeds into ufology as well, like
what I found interesting, this is kind of off topic but pretty much on topic, is that I saw that Chris Bledsoe's book was supposed to come out in December, it didn't, and then I saw Ryan posting they're like doing like a GoFundMe or something to like finalize it now to
really
because I guess they said that they're going to self-publish because they didn't want the story to change at all. They wanted to keep the story true or whatever, but they're going to self-publish, but they needed more funds. So I think there's a GoFundMe or something like that to finish the book, and it was supposed to be out this, December, but I was like, well, what's going on with there? I mean, so like if there's that whole, it'd be interesting to read that book to see if any of the things that we're talking about, the seeding the narratives or any of that shit follows everything that we've been talking about and discussing and researching. Because if that's it, and that's one of the new, up there with the Lazars or whatever, to be one of the pinnacles of the, disclosure movement things. Like,
I mean, Ryan has brought in this whole idea that there's a ruse going on. He talks about the Illuminati. Like he said that there's secret societies that are spinning bullshit, basically trying to control the narrative, which is kind of everything that we're saying. But like, I mean, the Bledsoe story is fascinating, but I think we should do a separate episode on that.
Oh yeah, for sure. We were just talking about books, and it's like, well, if Strieber and everybody else, and they've been doing these, and like we were talking about the other day, the Necronomicon from, basically, Lavinda finally came out and said that it was him, and he was putting library cards in libraries for 30 years to like, it's just like, and these are all the same players that are involved with Bledsoe and either tangentially or like directly, right? So I mean, what's going to happen with this one? It's going to be another one.
Things, right? The fact that he's the cover of the book is not Salvador. What we're talking about, it's
Jesus.
It's Jesus, but it's on that Leonardo da Vinci painting, the Salvador Mundi, where he's holding the sphere. Yeah, like, I mean, what they're doing using that image is tying it straight into the Merovingian mysteries. I don't know if they're going to use this terminology, but the Priory of Sion, the codes from the ancients, the Templars, I guess, Rosicrucians, all that stuff. It's going to be interesting.
Think the title of the book is called UFOs of God, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, and he fully believes that they're angels,
Yeah. I mean,
and, they could be. Fuck, I don't know. What if they are?
Well, I don't know. I mean, like I say, I know that when we've talked about this sort of privately and stuff like that, like, it's a case that we're all interested in.
Yeah, we should definitely do a whole different episode on that for sure. Definitely.
Yeah, there's so much to it, like,
especially with Nick.
Yeah. It'd be good to get Nick on as well. It'd be good to get Ryan on.
Yeah, we should.
But yeah,
Jenna probably has a list already. Questions.
Did you mute?
Oh, she is on mute. Oh yeah. Have you?
Oh, she's back.
Oh, the dog definitely knows what's going on. As soon as we started talking about werewolves and shit and skinwalkers, the dog started picking it up.
At home, and there was people in the house.
Every time you start talking about serious, it's like,
that's my jam.
Jesus, man, that whole bloodline thing is still gets me, man. I mean, the thing that gets me makes me, I was thinking about this last night for some odd reason after our talk, was that every president, I can't remember this girl who did the research. It was like a grade school girl or a high school girl who did some kind of term paper that figured out like every single president, except for one, has direct relation or a descendant of, like, what was it, King James or something, or
Yeah,
King?
they're like all related somehow.
Every U.S. president is related to the English king. Is it King James? I think I want to say King James. I remember it was one of the kings.
Just
right?
by design, do you think?
Fuck yeah! How would it not be? How would it statistically? Even Donald Trump is related somehow to that bloodline, right?
Aren't you related to Trump, John?
No.
Yeah.
No, not you.
Yeah. Well, the clan, you know, if I follow my Scottish, follow my Scottish clan history, his family married into the clan that my family were part of, like the MacLeods. So like his mum was Mary MacLeod, and that's who. What was his dad's name? John Trump, was it? John Trump.
Yeah, John. Oh yeah. His uncle was the government scientist guy.
That's right. So he married. So they married into the MacLeods. Like if you go down the conspiracy route, they'd say that he married into it because the MacLeods are supposed to come from Merovingian stock. So Merovingians, if anyone's read Holy Blood, Holy Grail, that's, you know, like that idea that it's got a bloodline. And then obviously it turned up in the Highlander film as well. So you seen the Highlander films?
No.
Not seen Highlander?
There could only be one. All you need to do is there could be one.
Jenna, you got to go and watch Highlander like now. Yeah, cancel any family dues. Just go and watch Highlander. It's about the Clan MacLeod, an immortal from the Clan MacLeod, who basically lives throughout time fighting other immortals who come and try to claim the throne from him. Yeah, it's wild. It's really good.
And there can only be one. There can only be one.
There can be only one. Yeah,
there can be only.
And the whole soundtrack was done by Queen.
Oh, nice! I love Queen.
Yeah. It's banging. Like it's a good film.
Yeah, I remember watching it as a kid, going, "What the fuck is going on?" I remember like 11 or 12, going, "Everybody's like, Highlander is awesome." I'm like, I have no idea what the hell's going on. It's just a lot.
It's an interesting. The guy who wrote that film, like, I was thinking, like, because when I watched it again, I was like, oh, man, his influences in this film like are really strange. So I went to see what else he'd written, and another film that he'd done was the movie The Prophecy. Have you seen that one? Christopher Walken, Eric Stoltz, about an angels coming back to Earth, like Nephilim, war on Earth and everything, you know. And you've got, Viggo Mortensen turns up as Lucifer, like Angel Gabriel's played by Christopher Walken,
which is hilarious,
batshit crazy.
It's just Christopher Walken because he doesn't even play anybody else but himself. So it's
just himself. That's it. He's such a strange guy. Have you seen that clip of him introducing the Foo Fighters?
Yeah.
No, he goes like, apparently like he had to introduce the Foo Fighters like live on stage. And
Saturday Night Live. It was like a Saturday Night Live thing.
That's right.
Yeah.
And he said to like Dave Grohl and everybody backstage, he was like, "So when I introduce you, where do I put the emphasis in the words Foo Fighters?" And he goes, "Put it on the fighters." Yeah. So when he comes out, he's like, "Ladies and gentlemen, the Foo Fighters." It's so funny. The Foo Fighters.
It's so great.
I love that guy.
It's so good. It's so good.
But even Whitley Strieber apparently said, like, after we watched Communion, he has no idea what the fuck Christopher Walken was doing with that film. It's like some crazy alien. What the fuck?
I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
I remember that one scene where he's just sitting on the couch in the movie Communion, Christopher Walken, and he's like staring at the doorway, right? I think, and like the gray like peeks its head out or whatever, and he's just like, but it's Christopher Walken. So at the same time, it's just Christopher. Everybody else had been losing their minds, and get that fucking look on his face.
Yeah, regular Tuesday, like.
Yeah. That movie fucked me up as a kid too. That movie was freaky as a kid. Communion, like.
I've never seen that either.
Really?
Catch up. I always hated sci-fi when I was a kid. My mom always watched sci-fi, and now I'm like, I guess I need to watch this shit to see what they're trying to make us believe in.
Oh yeah, I can't remember. That movie was far from the book, though. I mean, obviously most of them are, but I mean, there's a lot of, but that was massive. That was a big movie. Same thing with Fire in the Sky. I remember that one.
I did see that.
Did you see that one?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that whole narrative was cool. That was a good. I think that was a good thing. But I remember recently reading about what's the guy's name? Travis Walton said that that he would like to change, remake it, because there was and there's like a clip that somebody did. There was an interview with him from probably like I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago maybe, that somebody took like actual actors and talked to Travis Walton, and they like did the scene where it was like a Nordic. He said that they weren't aliens. He said they were Nordics. They were like white, tall white guys, massively built. And so whoever this guy was, they used CGI and like 2 actors, and this guy was like a bodybuilder dude with like a long blonde wig and like a skin tight onesie.
Yeah.
And like they like walked him out of the hangar and stuff. And I think it was a blonde woman too in there. And basically he was saying, yeah, they weren't gray aliens. That was what the whole.
Yeah, I think he said they were wearing like helmets too, like some kind of glass thing on their head.
Yeah. Yeah. He said, but Hollywood, changed the whole thing, and it pissed him off because he had sold his rights and he wasn't allowed to like change it. But it was basically like Nordics had taken him out, and he was in a hangar. He was basically in a hangar. He came out of the ship, and it was like a giant hangar full of other ships, and they took him to another thing and basically like knocked him out. But it was like white dudes.
This was sorry, what was his name again?
Travis Walton.
Travis Walton. Really? Fucking hell, man, I didn't know any of that. That's crazy.
I think he was on Joe Rogan not that long ago, like maybe last year.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, he was talking about how it's completely different than the movie was, for sure.
Didn't somebody recently though like fully debunk him?
There was like efforts to do that. Like some of the guys that were in the truck with him were trying to say that he made it up or something, and then other people were trying to say that he got paid to say that he, it was basically somebody saying, one of the guys of the truck came out and said that, he made it up and wanted us to go along with it. And then other people were like, we got approached by somebody trying to give us money to say that too, but we didn't, like the other guys or whatever.
Really? So it might just be like set up like.
Right. Like, hey, here, we'll give you a bunch of money to say that Walton was making all this shit up if you go along with it. And I think, I don't know, it could be that's what happened or not.
It's a case I've hardly even looked into. I've seen the film, but I've never really looked into it. I should do.
After the Rogan thing, there was a big kind of resurgence in his story and a lot of the stuff that didn't come out. And that's how I found that the version, the new version that this guy made with the Nordics and things like that. But yeah, it's kind of weird, his story. I don't know either. It's probably tied into Mormonism, Scientology at some point. I don't know.
Well, I was about to say then, like, one thing I remembered about communion was the date that Whitley Strieber said he was abducted on was the vernal equinox.
No,
so
I didn't
making
know
a big deal of that. Yeah, like when you look at the actual date he was abducted, if you look at that date and when the vernal equinox occurred in 1981 or whatever the year was that it happened, I can't remember, but it was the vernal equinox, yeah. So everything about that just says Wicca. Some kind of occult ritual, do you know what I mean?
Odin!
Odin, yeah, out in the woods on the vernal equinox.
Yeah,
seeing Ishtar. Like,
right.
Hello there.
Imagine that.
Imagine that. And little blue guys.
I gotta get going. Sorry to cut it short. I gotta get going though.
Oh yeah, no worries.
Oh,
we can.
Really?
I'm so happy we got to even chat though. Again, it's been rad.
Yeah,
it's been great. Well, I'm going to go as well because I really, really want to go and eat some food again and drink a cup of tea.
Well, Happy New Year to you guys.
Happy New Year. Talk to you guys soon.
Yeah, we'll set up another time. We'll get Nick back in here and we'll talk about the Bledsoes and whatever else.
Yeah. All right.
That'd be awesome. All right.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye. See you later.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye, dude.